when I'd get the third letter from someone somewhere, they say, yeah, you put me down, but I'm coming, I'll be there on thus and such a date. I'll just take a chance. That part of myself, that love of myself, that honesty of myself, that sincerity of myself, I can understand. Because that's what I did. I took no one's no for an answer. After I saw that only the truth is true, and that truth, undistorted, clear, pristine, and beautiful, was the only thing that meant anything to me. That may be a stretch. That may sound hyperbolic, or that I'm using some. Other things were important too. Yes, family was important. Wife, sons, business. All of those things were important too. But the predominant thing that was important and meant more to me than any dollars I had was my quest for the truth. All right, those who come under those circumstances are those who have studied, and they have been many. And I would like to say that to my knowledge, none, and there's some here today, none have ever visited Woodsong or Lollygog without finding not necessarily what they came to hear, but infinitely more. And the consequence of these ideas that are being articulated here, in addition to allowing one to glimpse and get a hold on the peace that identity is, the jumping joy that is life, or the quiet, gentle, I don't know the words for it. But in addition to that, the added things that go with it, that appear to turn lives around, make new experiences. And believe me, Bill here takes no credit for any part of that, because what is this? But hopefully a mirror within awareness that says its story honestly and without motive, without any motive involved. Have I made that point clear? Now, I have learned to communicate to those by way of overtones in a way that what appear as human results have been without limit. If you want to hear this, it sounds self-serving, and I apologize, but I speak from the standpoint of awareness and not one who has done anything. I have seen crutches left behind. I've seen those who were blind see again. I've seen all the great side effects and the special effects take place. But that was quite secondary to what really came forth, a joy of comprehension, a joie de vivre, a joy of living that is childlike and eternal, a return to the essences of childlikeness. And those people have gone on to write books, to become editors of publication, to become teachers in their own right, with followings infinitely greater than this thing could say it had. This looks for no following. It's the message, of course, and not the messenger. I come to tell you of the most important message that could possibly be delivered. It is your own message that comes forth from within yourself, out of the joy of the genuine identity perceived and seen and touched down on tangibly, as will happen during our time together here. It's beginning, and will go on. I've got to say a few other things about overtone. I've already told a story or two that sounded a note. I know what other stories pertaining to specific events in a tangible experience of Bill's to tell that will resonate with the former story. And between those two will come forth a wordless, from within yourself overtone that will be your own sound and your own message. It's important that we have this clear so that you can understand academically and intellectually what I'm saying. Do you understand what I am saying now about overtone? It's really quite simple. Mark Twain wrote a most hilarious story about telling a ghost story, how to tell a ghost story. If anything should ever be put on television, it should be someone doing that. How to tell a ghost story in Mark Twain's words. And he clearly points out in there, he says, now at this point it's very important that we pause. So pause for a minute. And then he goes on with a few more lines and he's telling a ghost story and he says, now at this point it's important that you find someone and you look directly into their eyes. Preferably a pretty girl. Preferably one sitting up somewhere kind of close so you can really give her some eyeball contact. And then he goes on telling his ghost story a little bit more. And he explains there clearly in the art of the use of overtone. But, you know, I'm not certain that I've ever heard any sort of a metaphysical presentation or so-called religious presentation where the use of overtones was done consciously, and that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it, and I want you to know I'm doing it so there won't be any thought of manipulation or of he's trying to be hypnotic or whatever. I've been accused of 10,000 things, that is Bill has, and so I just want you to know now that I sound overtone. And from it, you can expect each of the stories told will make its own metaphysical point. It will be helpful, hopefully, in your daily affairs. It will withstand reason and logic. That is, it hopefully will get by the intellect of you with reason and logic so that it becomes acceptable, so that the intellect of us will allow the heart of us to consider it. And you know, this is what Moses meant when he spoke of the two little cherubs or something outside the Garden of Eden, and he said there are two out there with a sword, swinging their sword this way and that way, allowing to enter Eden that which they would. The intellect stands out there swinging a sword, and it listens only to what it would allow. Now, I'll tell a story that hopefully will satisfy the intellect of us, that the heart might consider it. Down in Clearwater, at this point, I had a little xylophone, and I would ding the bell. So just consider me dinging the thing, and I'll begin. I'm going to show you. I'll tell a story first. Just recently, Rachel Jane and I went to a concert. I don't get to go to many because not a lot of them get down to our neck of the woods, but we've built ourselves down there gigantic coliseum, and now that it will seat a lot of people, some of your artists managed to get down to Alabama. This gentleman who was coming is a performer in whom Rachel and I have an interest, in love, a young man who writes his own music, arranges his own music, performs it. Neil Diamond. You've all heard of him. I know all you young folks have heard of Neil. So we went to a Neil Diamond concert. as we approached the Coliseum, it looked like lines of ants coming from all the parking lot, all wending their way into that thing. And I thought to myself, gee whiz, gosh, do you suppose anybody who ever articulates anything relative to the truth itself would ever have such a gathering as that? Would that ever be possible? 20,000 people were on their way to listen to one man perform. To listen to one man perform and tell his own story in song. We got into the Coliseum, and I looked up, and holy smoke, I've never seen so many speakers in my life. Speakers hanging from all directions. Big ones, little ones. There were just about as many speakers as people. There was one pointing toward everyone. And from each of those speakers came a cable, until pretty soon the cables all came together, and there were big bundles of cables coming from all over the ceiling. And these bundles of cables were fed over into a console of some sort, where an engineer had to sit in order to... I was told it was a computer-type console that would take care and make certain that each speaker did what each speaker was supposed to when it was supposed to. Now, all of those speakers, hundreds of them, there for one man's performance, so that one man could tell his story. Excuse me for saying one man. I realize now I should say one person. One person. Then we sat down, and I noticed that there were lights everywhere. Klieg lights, spotlights, floodlights, lights of all different colors, lights that were stationary and lights that were moved. I like them, you know, almost. Lights that would blink. Lights, there surely was a light there for everybody in the room, because everybody had lights in their eyes. Now, a bundle came from all of those lights and also went to a computer where another engineer sat to make sure that the lights would do what the lights would do. When he jumped up and down, the lights jumped up and down. When he walked to the right, the lights followed him to the right. When he went to the left, they followed him to the left. All those lights to facilitate, to aid one man telling his story. And then pretty soon there was some background music to set the mood. Now, while it was a tape, it was still coming through all of those speakers. And the number of artists, it was a full orchestra playing the background music, and surely 100 people had to be involved in the making of that tape somewhere at some time. All of that music to aid, to facilitate one person telling his story. Then all of a sudden, here came the musicians out on the stage, about 12 of them. And the first one sat down behind a battery of drums like I'd never seen before. Drums that glistened and big drums and little drums. And he had a swivel chair so that he could sit in that swivel chair and turn any direction he wanted to hit any one of them he wanted to. And he really could do it. And he had a whole battery of sticks up there in case he dropped one, there was another one he could grab. And if one broke, he could grab another one. And then just behind him was a man, a percussionist. And he had a battery of things to beat and pound, from drums from Trinidad and drums from Tobago. Is that what it's called? Drums from the East Indies and drums from Africa. But he had all of those things to beat and more sounds to make to facilitate Neil making his presentation. Then finally, there was an instrument that I was very much interested in. It's called a Moog synthesizer. Now, I've heard of the Moog and I've heard it, but I'd never seen one. And here is this instrument. And you folks out here, I know all about this and these things, and so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm just telling you of my own wonderment at what I saw. This Moog is a machine capable of making every sound, I'm told. It can make sounds that can't even be heard by the ear. It can mimic the sounds of most of the instruments. The Moog synthesizer can even make the sound of the square drum. But the Moog can also make sounds that are not even legal. It makes that very, very low note that has been discouraged by the television and motion picture industry in the use of, so I'm told, a very, very low note that rumbles and batters the solar plexus of the body and creates consternation and fear. A very low note. It's capable of that too. An illegal sound it can make. I see a quizzical look. A book called The Symphony of Life, written by Dr. Hatcher. Hatch Andrew. Thank you. Close. Dr. Andrew. Musician heads up the music department for one of the Ivy League colleges. This is his book in which the story of the Moog and its low notes that are illegal is told. All right. Here I am, and I see this instrument, and then I see the engineer sitting at it, and he has in front of him a whole battery of dials, all kinds of dials. It was a dial watcher's paradise. It was also all kinds of little things to slide and things to touch. It was a paradise for anyone that enjoys doing that sort of thing. And then, all of these dials are illuminated, had light within them, so no matter what all the flickering lights outside did, he could still see his dials and know what to do. All of this, these instruments, to help one man telling one man's story. Well, as we tell the story that we are, we don't have all of those lights and assistance. We do not have an entourage that follows about helping, putting the right spot in the right place and putting the makeup on and helping with the lines. We don't even have a prepared text, for Pete's sake. I'm sure that to you, motion picture and television people, this is like a rudderless ship at sea that doesn't even have a goal to move towards, so it's lost from the very beginning. But while I may not know the direction in which a talk ever may go, I have one singular advantage. I know where it starts from. It starts from the beginning. It starts with awareness. The only awareness we've ever been. The only one we will ever be. The divine awareness. God's awareness. This awareness that's going on right here, right now, that is the life you are. I know where I start from, and I will stay there and go no further. I would now ding the bell. Consider it dinged. I almost said consider it dunged. Consider it dinged. Once upon a time, the disciples asked Jesus what the experience of death was like. His reply was succinct and humorous and clear as a bell. He said, well, if you are concerned about the end, you must have discovered the beginning. Blessed is the man who has found the beginning and stays there. And stays there. 500 or so years earlier, gentleman in the East, that librarian, keeper of books, Lao Tse, simple, unpretentious, a child man, even as was that Galilean carpenter, told those who came to listen to themselves, he said, consider the ancients. See how they have returned to childlikeness. They have discovered the beginning. And they stay there. This awareness that we begin with is the essence of the eternal child that we've heard of spoken of before. Lest ye become as children. Ding. Ding. Do you remember when you were a little boy or a little girl? When you were a little person? You see, gender, that's old thing too. Life, awareness, includes all there is to both genders. And not only that, even the body that appears nearest at hand. The ones that you look down and say, aha, these fingers and toes are the only ones I can make do what I want them to do. That includes both genders too. Not metaphysical mumbo-jumbo, not mystical pizzazz, but scientific evidence that we hear our scientific community now saying, our physiologists and whatnot. There are as many male genes as female genes, or whatever they are. But do you remember when you were a child? Do you remember maybe when the circus was coming to town? And you saw that big billboard up there with all the bright colors, brighter than anything that was normal around the town, with tigers and lions and the ferocious looks and the ladies with scanty costumes and the men with bulging muscles and everything on those posters. Do you remember that? You do remember. Do you remember the thrill? Do you remember the joy? Now, all of that took place within awareness. And if we wanted to consider ourselves a possessor of awareness, we'd say, yeah, I remember that happened when I, possessor of awareness, was a little boy years ago. No, listen. The joy that awareness included then, awareness includes now. That joy has gone nowhere. I don't care if a war has intervened and in between time you've got shrapnel in your legs and you've got a steel plate in your head and the psychological wounding on the inside is 10 times greater than that. No difference. Awareness still includes the joy that the child is and will forever include it. It's available to be touched again, to be found again. It comes forth as overtone. One more note as I strike my 4-note chord. Do you remember maybe the way they used to skywrite with airplanes? An old bi-wing plane and everything, and it would go zooming through the air and smoke was coming out of the back and he would start writing a big C and everybody would look and watch. Do you remember watching that? Do you remember? Now listen, there he was up there writing a word. Coca-Cola, or maybe another word that had a T in it and an I in it. The intellect of us watched and wondered, now I wonder if he's going to get the last A on cola done before the coca blows away. And if the Santa Ana winds are blowing, of course, he would hardly get the C done before it was gone. Well, that's what the intellect was doing, but what was the heart doing? The little boy of us, the little girl of us, was looking with that joy, that eagerness, that feeling on the inside like at school just before the Christmas holidays. You're going to get out and you're looking over in the corner and there's a Christmas tree. Do you remember that? I tell you that joy, that feeling, is the beginning of the eternal joy that is the peace that passeth understanding. It is tangibly present, to be touched down on. It awaits our acknowledgement of it, our acceptance of it. It awaits our first, maybe, listening to some part of ourself tell us that's what it is. And then finally, our acceptance that it is that. It's that simple. A bird song is without word. Down at Woodsong, those of you who've been there know I've got birds on top of birds. Just everywhere, birds. And squishels and chipmunks and their song is without words. Yet, that song is quite capable of being listened to and understood for precisely what it is. Bringing conscious awareness back to the joy we felt as children before the tremendous encumberment of intellectual adulthood, before the accumulation of intellectualism's time and experiences, before the veneer of a superimposed set of values, all belonging to the me who says my life, my fleeting life, my fading life. There is a new word that has come into being lately. It's growing popular in academic circles, called synergy. Scholars of myself know I have heard this word for many years, but I would like to just say a little bit about it. A very simple definition of the term synergy is, a mathematician would say, well, it means that the total is more than the sum of the parts. The overtone that comes forth as a consequence of our daily being is synergistic. That is, it is more than the total of its apparent parts. Much more than. You see, in the use of words as a way to communicate, actually we see that there was an ineffable substance appearing as thing that preceded the word for it. The word that came about, or that came into being, and finally the alphabet that was developed as a means of allowing everyone to say the same word for the same thing, either directly or in correspondence. We see that the alphabet only has 26 letters in it, and yet look at the hundreds of thousands of books that come forth as a consequence of the various combinations that can be used. This is synergy, simply stated. 26 letters that would allow a tremendous blooming of an idea. Even more simply than that, you musicians who have your 9 or 7 notes, 7, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. 7 notes. How many symphonies can be written, have been written? The symphony is the synergistic output of a finite number of notes. I tell you that as the feelings that will evolve as a consequence of these talks, those things that bloom in small ways will be a synergistic explosion in your affairs. And how do I know this is so? Because I have seen it so countless times. And if I were to not see it so today, and in the days that follow your experience, it would be the first time I haven't. So therefore you may anticipate a stirring within. But that stirring will be your own message coming forth. It'll come forth first as just a stirring, a feeling, a new view, a new outlook for which there will be no words. But as time goes on, you'll devise words, new ways to say it, new ways to develop it. New systems will grow, new modes of communication, new ways of acting or producing or directing, or new ways of writing, new ways of being, living, all of which, and it will be your own. It will be your own message and no one else's. Now, if I can find it. Wouldn't you know? Just bear with me, because I'd rather read it than tell it, because it is the note I wish to sound. Rachel Jane, am I coming to the end of the tape and the end of my time? At Woodsong, where I write, a green vine grows. Now that same vine is renewed again and again. And it has been there for a long time during my much warfare with words. Its leaves look long at me, and they seem to laugh at me at times, knowing as I do that there are infinitely more secrets in an inch of that little vine, in that living vine, in that laughing vine, in that vigorous, shining vine, than ever in all the words I could ever find to use. And you know, Tennyson made that statement in a lovely verse I would like to read. Flower in the crannied wall, I pluck you out of the crannies, and I hold you here, root and all, in my hand. Oh, little flower, if I could understand what you are, root and all in all, I should know what God and man is. An old Alabama black man stretched forth his hand, and he touched the face of a growing, living flower. And in the sweet simplicity and humility that was his way, he said, when I touch that flower, I am touching infinity. It existed long before there were human beings on this earth, and it'll continue to exist for 1,000,000 years or more. Through the flower, through this flower, I talk to infinity, which is only a present, silent force. This is not a physical contact I make. It's not the earthquake, wind, or fire. It's in the invisible world, in the intangible world, it is that small, still voice that calls up the fairies. The old man whom I quoted is an Alabamian. Not native Alabamian, but he lived there most of his life. I, of course, have just spoken of Dr. George Washington Carver, who had a lot to do with peanuts and other things. And Dr. Carver had a laboratory in the school where he taught, and he called it God's Little Garden. And Dr. Carver was unique in one respect. He allowed no one, students or faculty, to bring a book into his little garden. Because he said the communication that takes place here is beyond words, more than words. Folks, right here, right now, there is a presence. Present. And, okay, be as skeptical as you like. There is a presence. There must be, because there is something being this awareness that is aware. The physicists and the chemists and the astrologers, the astronomers, and all connected with whatever is considered tangible and finite will tell us for all that we can see, feel, measure, or think about, there is a that, an ineffable that, being it. For example, the physicist would say, why, even this body is light. It's perhaps arrested light. It's no longer moving at that 286,000 miles a second as the photons moving from the sun, but rather it is arrested, and it appears then as form. But nonetheless, it is basically light. So therefore, even tangibility has light, being the tangible appearance. And any musician would say, look, no matter what score of music I hold up, there is a harmony, a principle of harmony, being that symphony. There is no word that can be uttered here, no thought that can be spoken that there is not an ineffable behind it being. I've been challenged on that, even by the schools of philosophy, and then discussions, and it was upheld. It's true. Everything that we can think of, there is an ineffable that being it. Well, now, what is our beginning? It is an all-inclusive and infinite awareness. Awareness is, and it's the only is that any of us can speak of and say it is. We do know, at least in the morning, that life is living. You know, we might not like what we like, but life is living. There is life present. Right now, life is. And we know it, and we know it, because it is the life we are. Well, all right, if every other thing on the face of the earth has an ineffable behind it, being it, why should all of a sudden this awareness have nothing being this awareness? I, for myself, said, all right, this awareness is the functioning of God. God is the ineffable that, being this awareness I am. And suddenly I had my proof that God is. This awareness is present. Present right now, as Dr. Carver said, is a presence, an ineffable presence, for which no words are sufficient, no actions are enough, and yet include all words and all actions, being all things. And that presence is present, right here, right now. And it's all that is present, right here, right now. And this awareness we are is its very functioning. It's very living going on. What an identity to be. Holy mackerel. What a thing to be. To be the divine mind's self-awareness going on. No longer when we see a scene can we say somebody else's scene. It is a scene that is included within this awareness that is myself, to be understood for what it is. And if it is the ineffable scene, it's heaven's scene, a good scene. Now suppose it's been labeled bad. Then we'll go into that during our next period. And I think I can make it so graphically clear that this is heaven, and that this place whereon we are all seated with tired tokuses is holy ground, that there will be no question. And I want to thank all of you for such rapt attention and interest, and those of you who can are most welcome to come this afternoon and join the rest who will be here. I thank you all very much, and we'll reassemble at 2 o'clock.